Welcome to the Minimal Mom Podcast. Today, Dawn is joined by Jen and Jill from the Frugal Friends podcast, where they share tips and insight every week on how to buy less, live well, and be a good steward of all your resources. With over 6.5 million downloads, Jen and Jill enjoy helping their listeners learn how to control their spending without all the guilt and shame of strict budgeting.
Well, most of us are trying to curb our spending these days. So, Jen and Jill, I am so curious to hear about your trash can trick because, give us all the advice that you have.
I heard this one from Jill, and I am obsessed with it ever since she first told it on our show.
So the idea is when you're shopping at whatever store you're shopping at and you find something that looks really beautiful, it's so aesthetically pleasing, looking at you, Target and the Joanna Gaines Magnolia section, usually that's very well placed and things just look beautiful. And so we pick something off the shelf, and the trash can trick is to curb that impulse spending. Take that item to the trash can aisle of the store, put it next to all the trash cans and see if you still like it. Does it still hold up in a non-aesthetically pleasing environment? Do we still enjoy it? Because more than likely, that's going to be a little bit like what it looks like when we bring it home to our own place. Not that our houses are filled with trash cans, but when we remove it from the aesthetically pleasing environment where it's curated with all these other really beautiful things, it can help us see the item for what the item actually is, which is most likely what it's going to be when we get it back home and we think, why doesn't it look good in my house? I must not be a good decorator. I got to get a whole bunch of other stuff too to make this look better in my home.
Yes.
And multiply the impulse spending. So seeing it in a more accurate environment can help us say, you know what? I actually don't think I'm going to purchase this.
Well, and this is why the dollar spot annoys me so much at Target, because when it first came out, it was so fun because they had such cute things and it was very reasonably priced. But then you, like you said, you get it home and you're like, oh no, I needed 6 of these to actually make any kind of difference. It's like cute stuff, but the scale is all wrong. And I was like, how many of those things did I have to buy before I finally realized, just look at it in the store, because once you get it home, it doesn't actually really look that good.
Yeah, like those large chains, they're like a foot long, or the big knots.
Yeah.
There's so many things that make sense in the display.
Yes.
But your home is not a display. It's a home.
So Jen and Jill, you have a podcast, Frugal Friends. So tell us a little bit about yourselves and how and why you started it.
Yeah. So Jill and I started Frugal Friends about 6.5 years ago, and we've released over 400 episodes, basically with the idea that frugality isn't penny pinching. It's not getting the cheapest price on everything, and it's not being proud of spending as little as possible. It's about good stewardship of resources. So that's most obviously with your money. We want to steward our dollars well, but also our physical space, because you have a finite amount of physical space in your home, your car, your office. So making sure that is a place you enjoy to be, as well as your time. You have a limited number of hours in the day. You have a limited amount of capacity in your brain to think about things every day. And then also our natural resources, because many of our natural resources are finite as well.
So Jill, you said, so we got to visit on your podcast as well. So I will link to that episode over there. We had a great conversation. Jill, you said you're pretty minimalist. Are you more minimalist than Jen?
I think potentially yes, but that's only because I don't have children. So that'd be a little unfair to compare. I've got less people living in the home.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy keeping very few things. And that does blend over into schedule and all of these things. I just enjoy minimalism to its core.
Yeah.
Jill is being modest because even before we had kids, Jill and her husband Eric lived in an RV twice. And what was 120 square feet, for extended periods of time.
Awesome.
So it's just a lifestyle that you guys have been able to, and here, allow me to speak for you, Jill, that you've been able to really embrace, and it has really opened you guys up for so many possibilities. And that's how we met, is that they were, in their RV traveling around the country. And that's where we met.
That's so cool. And I mean, I hear this from so many women that decluttering and simplifying and living more simply goes hand in hand with getting out of debt. And I know, I mean, my husband and I had tried multiple times to get out of debt before we were finally able to successfully do it. And I think sometimes we have to say, like, what's easier for me right now? Because living within your means, not buying all the things that are being sold to us all the time right now, it actually takes a lot of emotional energy. But for some, it's easier to start with physically decluttering. And it's scientifically proven out, I love this, that when you physically declutter your home and you're living in a more simplified environment, that you have more confidence, you have more of a sense of autonomy. And so I love that we can do some physical actions then that lead us up to feeling like we have the capacity to get out of debt, because usually that's not as instantaneous and it does take a little bit of time. So women are most of us are really struggling with credit card debt and other debts right now. And impulse spending, I hear from a lot of women, really is it's just a way we've learned to cope with all of the crap show of the last however many years, right? And so what are some other tips that you have for women that are struggling with impulse spending?
Yeah. So we, in our book, Buy What You Love Without Going Broke, we talk about 5 different root causes of impulse spending, because not all impulse spending is the same.
Okay.
It's just impulse spending is just unplanned purchases, which aren't actually the enemy, because you cannot plan everything in your life. That's one of the guilt and shameful things around budgeting, is because we're supposed to make this perfect budget and stick to it perfectly, right? Like, why can't I stick to the budget? I'm the one who made it. The reality is that there's just no getting around every unplanned purchase. But we do have some tips for avoiding those impulse purchases that kind of lead to some of the regret and the overspending that are really not great for our finances. So one of the first reasons that we impulse spend is because we view shopping as an activity, which if you're a 90s kid or an early 2000s kid, weekend, mall, big box store. Even now, millennials, like adults, farmers market. We're going to these little tchotchke markets, around the holidays. It's just a thing we do as an activity. And there's a lot of reasons to that. We think our book talks about values-based spending. That's like the skill of spending. If you can learn to align your spending with what you value, then you can cut out a lot of overspending and really feel good about the money you are spending. And so one of those values that most people are going to put at the top of the list is family and friends. Like, those are the kind of 2 of the highest values. And a lot of these shopping as activities come as a root cause of wanting to spend more time with family and friends. We do it, in community. So having a bucket list of things that you can do to spend time with friends and family. And these are things that they're just out there, but we don't think about them because malls and markets, those are advertised to us. Those are right there. It's easy when you're trying to think of something to do. You don't have to think hard because they put those options right in front of you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The options that don't cost money are not advertised. Mm-hmm. So they're not right in front of you. So you have to advertise them to yourself by making these bucket lists of things that you love doing with certain friends, or things you want to do, and just have those things prepared so that when it's time for you to choose an activity, you don't automatically jump to shopping.
Another reason that we might impulse shop, one of the 5, is stress. We're just stressed and we're looking for a way to cope with the emotions that we're experiencing. And to be fair, it's not just stress, although that is a lot of time the impetus to our spending. We want a distraction, whether we're shopping in person or online. I mean, online is so accessible. Yeah. So oftentimes we just find ourselves scrolling or even falling into something on Facebook or social media, and we think this might help if I were to purchase this item. And so, speaking of having lists, this is another area where we can have a list of pre ideas on what we want to do, how we can best care for ourselves, given whatever the need is or the emotion is at the time. So, when I'm stressed, what are some alternatives? When I'm happy, when I'm sad, when I'm celebratory, when I'm feeling down, when I had a good day, when I had a bad day, because we spend in all of these emotions.
Yeah.
And being celebratory is a cause for something that we might spend on, as well as being stressed. So depending on what the need is, we can then be really specific on how we meet that need, because most of the time spending doesn't actually give us the coping mechanism that we need, that actually targets the core thing that's happening for us. So by having a list of, here's something that I would really enjoy that maybe isn't me spending unnecessary money, that I can do as an alternative and actually meet the need when I'm happy, sad, fill in the blank. Some of those things could include trying a new recipe, getting outside, stretching, engaging in a hobby, calling a friend, whatever it is that in general, when I'm feeling this emotion, this might be the thing that I could turn to. And something really cool that we find in that is we then meet the need. We're developing coping skills actually work and move us into the next phase, the next emotion, the next task that's ahead of us, versus the letdown that happens after we make a purchase that we weren't intentional about. We didn't want to buy it.
Yeah. That's so good. And let's talk about influencers a little bit, because man, for those of us who are millennials and a little bit older, I mean, the amount of changes we have seen in the way that you can acquire things and the way that they are sold to us is, I mean, remarkable. And so they're sneaky because they become your friend online, right? I mean, there's women I follow online. Obviously, they have no idea who I am, and I follow them, and I feel like I'm their friend, right? So then when they recommend something to me, or even better yet, they're like, "Hey, friend, I got you a good deal on this," right? Then I feel there's that sense of urgency. There's a sense of personal endorsement. Obviously, they wouldn't be selling it to me if they didn't believe in it, right? And so I find myself buying things from these people thinking they're going to be these great miracle products, and they aren't. And then I just feel so guilty. So, what are some tactics that you've learned in this regard?
Yes. Okay. So for this one, I have 2 tips. The first one is you've got to put it on a list and wait. Like, some people say 24 hours. I'm going to say 30 days because, and really you have to pick a time that works for you. Like, you can't just set like a 24-hour or a 30-day and live by it, like very by the book, like it's got to feel right for you. So, but you have to put it on a list. And I specifically say don't add it to your cart and wait, because a lot of these online shopping platforms have abandoned cart emails, and they will keep reminding you that there's something in your cart. You don't get emails about things that are on lists. So Amazon has list features or wish list, and you won't get emails about those. Or you can use something like your Notes app or Notion and just keep a list there of things that you would like to buy, however you saw it, whether it was an influencer or a friend, and keep it there for a while. It's kind of like, Dawn, when you talk about like when you're decluttering, you put things in a box and you just put it away. Yes, that's what you're doing before you buy something. So it's before you've already spent money on it. You do this, you put it in this virtual box, let it live there for a couple weeks, and then you can revisit that list once a month. And I would love, I tell people, tally up like all those things that you have decided you don't want to buy. That's how much money you just saved yourself. That's how much money that you're not giving to the thrift store when you inevitably give that thing away. And we don't want to girl math it and say, oh, I just saved this much money, so I have this much money to spend. We're not girl mathing this, okay? But yeah, so that's a really good like first step. And so the second is like when they can get you a discount. Everybody loves a discount. And I'm going to pull this with all sales. So whether it's a sale offered by someone you know or someone you think you know online, or it's just a sale that you just encounter in the wild. Anything that you buy for the first time, you should pay full price for. I know that's going to be super controversial, but a lot of the times, 100% of the time, sales are not for us. Sales are marketing tactics. They are for the companies because they know sales make people impulse buy. And so sometimes the only way we try something new is because it's on sale. Companies know that. Influencers get discount codes because companies know this. So if your rule is that the first time I pay full price, you know that's something you were going to buy anyway, that it is something that you are going to even maybe have a little more incentive to use because you didn't get a deal on it. You've got a little more sunk cost fallacy, for better or for worse. And then if it's something you want to buy again, that's when we go on the hunt for the discounts, the sales cycles, all of that. We're using a different email address to get that influencer's discount to pretend like it's the first time we're buying, like that's when we go for the sale. But we do not use sales as reasons to impulse buy something new.
Yeah, and I've had to unfollow a couple influencers just because I'm like, it's just my weakness. There's something about someone that you feel like selling you something. And I really respect, there are influencers that I really trust everything they recommend, and I feel like they've earned my trust and they've had good recommendations. And then there's others where I'm like, darn it, I just feel like you're trying to earn commission right now.
Yeah.
And so I have to unfollow them, which stinks at times because I don't know, we're all looking for fun people to follow. And I've also learned about myself that like I can't go on Instagram or Facebook in the evening, because in the morning I can say it's going on the wish list, like I'm not going to impulse buy it. But there's something after like 9 o'clock at night when your brain is just like shutting down, all of your emotional energy is gone for the day.
Your
I'm like,
decision fatigue
yes,
is rampant at 9 p.m.
yes,
That's the witching hour for even adults.
yes,
You think
right.
it's just for babies. It's for adults too.
Yeah. So I'll like pick up my fiction book and be like, well, at least in a book, no one is trying to sell you anything, right?
Mm-hmm. And if they are, you can't buy it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's so good. So this is fascinating though. So what are some of the other reasons why you found that we impulse buy?
We love the thrill of the hunt, and I certainly commiserate with this one in particular. I enjoy the experience of shopping, digging, and I think some of that psychology around impulse spending of I am smart because I found this really great thing. I found this deal. We're drawn to maybe the clearance sections or the discounted items, and it's because it's that scarcity that can pull us into thinking, oh, we're going to have something.
Yeah.
And we're going to have it at the best possible price. And we had to hunt, and we have this sunk cost into this experience that even further drives the potential of impulse spending. And so for those of us like this who enjoy the hunt, I think we can still engage in that with that list that Jen had talked about previously. If you still want it, look for it used. Try and maybe repurpose something around your house. There are ways that we can kind of engage in the hunt, the creativity, the problem solving, the thrill of it without just going and shopping as an activity just to be able to have the hunt. I love this at a thrift store. I still get to dig, but with my list in hand of the things that have kind of tallied up over the last couple of weeks or months, and I can hunt for those items. But there's also other things that we can engage in that doesn't have to include shopping. It can include hunting for a new recipe that we want to try, or, searching out a community that would be really fun for us, trying a new thing that we haven't tried before. There's so many other things that when we take away just shopping or impulse spending, that we can really get more to the core of our values, what makes us tick, what's life-giving to us, and find that, ooh, we're enjoying life even more so
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
because we've expanded our horizons.
I love that idea of not just taking away the shopping or the social media, right? But replacing it with something else. And, I think it is hard when we are trying to be frugal. I remember, when our kids were little, and I mean, as they're talking about the hunt, I mean, going to garage sales was a thrill when you have very little money. And then especially with kid stuff, oh my goodness, there you can find so much cute kids clothing and toys, and the kids, you could spend $1 on a toy and they are just so ecstatic. And so that was a slow ship to turn for me because I equated frugality with getting lots of stuff at garage sales and then trying to store it and organize it. And to me, I thought like, well, that's what's being a good steward is I found these, Gap jeans for the boys. They're size 6 and they're only 2 right now, but I will store them away because they're only $1 until they fit into that size. And then I will be so glad that I had them and look, where's my award for being the cheapest mom on the block, right? Until I realized that, oh my goodness, you have to manage all of that stuff and it's still money going out. And now I don't have the actual things that I need for right now. So I don't even go to garage sales anymore, which I never thought I would ever say in my entire life. So
Yeah. Oh, same story. I resonate with what you're describing so much. For me, frugality previously, years ago, was separate from minimalism. And I would not have considered myself minimalist or something I even particularly aimed at the time. I just wanted to get a good deal.
yeah.
I wanted to be able to have people over and be like, got that for $1, got that for free. That was a 2-for-1. Like, I am known for that amongst my friend group, like telling the story about how I got it in a creative way, different from how most people collect their things. And it got to the point, I tell this story in the book that we wrote, that people would come over to my house and they'd be like, there's so much to look at. And it was not a compliment, but I would be like, you're welcome for entertaining your eyes. But it started to stir in me like, maybe I shouldn't have so much stuff just because it was inexpensive. And of course, living in an RV really helped me to pare down and identify, what do I actually need? What's serving me? How can I buy quality over quantity? But there can be, as you're describing, this convergence of frugality, stewarding all of our resources well, and minimalism. And when we can find that convergence, life is real great.
Yeah. No, it's so true. I mean, I often tell people, I'm like, I don't know which was more life-changing, if it was decluttering 85% of our stuff or if it was getting out of debt. They both take such a huge stress off of your shoulders. And, my lane is decluttering and minimalism and simple living. So I try to stay in that. Getting out of debt can be a little divisive. I find that the conversation sometimes and I don't know if it's because we carry around a lot of guilt and shame about our debt or we're not in the place to take it on. So you're just kind of like, be quiet. So I don't always talk about that so much, but it changed everything when we got out of debt. When we had all of our consumer debt paid off, I could not believe how much less stress we had. And then when things like the kids need braces, and you're like, I'm sorry, how much is that? Oh, Gage has to have braces twice. Oh, okay. Wow. Like, that's a car,
What are
you
you
know?
doing to your teeth, bro?
Yes, right? And so, but how I was like, okay, we can pay for that and we can pay for camp and just the random when the car needs tires and those types of things. And it feels like I don't even like to use the word sacrifice, and I really love your guys' approach to getting out of debt because it feels like for the few years that we went all in and we did give up things for a season, what we gave up was so small compared to the benefits that we get to experience year after year now. And so I feel very passionately about it, but I also recognize that if anyone listening is just feeling so overwhelmed and tired, and that it can feel so hard to get out of debt. So what would you say to the woman who is listening that says, you don't understand, like my situation is hopeless. Like if you add up all the debt, I'm barely making ends meet. Like how could I even begin to think about actually getting out of debt?
Yeah. I mean, 10 years ago, that was me. Like, I had more debt than I made in a year. And I think I was engaged 10 years ago. And I was about to marry someone who was bringing more student loan debt into our life, you know? So we ended up paying off $78,000 of debt in 2 years. And we were very young without kids. And it was a season in which it was really optimal for us. I see that looking back. When we were in it, I was employed part-time. My now husband, he was unemployed twice during those 2 years. We got kicked out of our rental and were forced to move because the landlord wanted to turn our place into an Airbnb. So we decided to buy a house like on a whim. So there, every couple of months over this 2 years, if I'm just sitting in it and looking at it for what it is, people are telling us, and I'm telling myself, like, this is not a good time to be paying off debt. Like, we should not be doing this. Thankfully, we were just so committed. And it was the one decision, the one goal that we decided could make a lot of our other future goals easier to accomplish. And so that's how we decided that it was for us. We were also at a point where we knew, like, if we did this in 2 years, and then start investing, like we still have a great time horizon for compound interest. That's also not the case for everyone. So looking back, you'll always be able to have the perspective of that was the perfect time to pay off debt, but you will never know that that's the perfect time in the time. So I think the most important thing is to just honor your season. And like when we were saving up for a down payment for a house in that like 6 weeks, we were obviously not paying off debt in those 6 weeks on that journey, right? This was the golden age. This was 2017 where you could afford a down payment in 6 weeks, right? So like you have to honor your season, but you cannot let your season be an excuse for not pursuing the goal that you have deemed right for you in that season.
I will also add that I think there's some anchors that can be really helpful for us when we first consider debt freedom. It is very daunting. I can commiserate with what you're describing for this, potential viewer and what Jen has described for my husband and I. It took us way longer for slightly less debt. We paid off $60,000 of debt in 7 years. Similarly, what I made in a year was far less than what the debt was. I was a social worker making $24,000 a year. And even though this was about 12 years ago, that still was not a lot of money then. And so thinking through how in the world would I put more money aside? Yeah, it can feel so overwhelming. But I think there's a couple of things that have become helpful, that some of these things we've learned in hindsight that we're trying to pass along to others. But there's a few principles we talk about in the book. One of them is, just a concept is debt's neutrality. I think if we can begin with a mindset where we are beginning to push out the guilt and the shame associated with taking on debt. There are various reasons that we take on debt, and we believe debt is neutral. I know there's a lot of voices out there saying it's not, and there's good debt and there's bad debt and it's shameful. And we're pushing back to say it's neutral. In many ways, it is a tool. It is a tool that Jen and I will even still engage in given our season and what we need to accomplish. Debt is what allows us to go to college in our 20s when we don't have money for it. It is what allows us to put a roof over our heads when the kids are young. It is what allows us to get a safe vehicle when vehicle prices have skyrocketed, right? There's a lot of reasons that we might engage in debt. And there are reasons that we might have engaged consumer debt. We're not going to put shame on it. Yes, it's a good idea to get rid of that because it is high interest and it will keep us from some of these other financial goals. But I think if we can begin there, that's a really helpful spot to begin. And then to take hold of some of these other tethers, like honoring our season, learning what it is that we really value and how to spend on those things, leaning into our community, practicing contentment, building a life around simplicity and efficiency. These are some of the foundations that we can then build upon that make paying off debt and any other financial goal achievable when we're able to kind of understand, what does this look like for me, and hold what we call the radical middle. We can be drawn to these extremes of either I'm going to pay off all my debt and it's going to have to happen in 6 months, or I'm going to ignore it entirely and collect more and never be able to invest in my retirement. And we say we can have both and we can make it look reasonable and individualized for each of us on the foundation of some of these principles that we've described, where it doesn't have to look fast, clickbaity. You've paid off a ton of money in such a short amount of time. It can look slow and content and simple. And someday you find yourself in this place of debt freedom, having then built the skills to do even more with your finances and your life beyond that.
Yeah, that's so good. And it is, I mean, it's is very similar to decluttering because you do start to enjoy the benefits even before you are fully out of debt. There is something about living within your means that actually is very freeing. I heard it once said that there's so much freedom in obedience, and just that it feels good for the instant when we're buying things that we know we don't have the money for. We get that initial hit, but then, man, there is so much guilt that often comes from it too. And so I remember when we were like really trying to go all in. And at that point, I had discovered Starbucks and I was like, there's just something about a caramel macchiato that I feel entitled to after a hard day, right? But I remember when I learned to make it at home and I got an espresso blend of coffee and I found recipes online and I tried it a bunch of times and figured it out at home. It was so rewarding. And it doesn't mean I wouldn't still from time to time like get one at Starbucks, but there was something about just kind of like overcoming that hurdle and being like, you know what, like you can have a hard day and you can make it at home too, that it was actually like, it built a lot of confidence in me. And I realized like, okay, I don't have to like be at the whim of all of my impulses all the time. Like I can choose at times to do it and also choose not to. And so it is hard. It's hard in the beginning, but I do believe if you surround yourself with people like Jen and Jill, there's lots of like really positive accounts on Instagram where they're not selling you stuff and they are, encouraging frugality and different ways to get out of debt quicker. I think if you surround yourself with those types of voices, that you will feel encouraged and you will stay the course because all of us have fallen off and we know that, but getting back up and recommitting to it, it can change your entire life. So we get to we're all speakers at the Get Organized or HQ conference, which is a blast if you have not had a chance to attend it yet. So what are you guys speaking about there?
So we are talking about the kind of the first section of our book, Buy What You Love Without Going Broke. That's the title of the talk. And we're talking about the kind of the foundations of values-based spending. So if you've always been taught like spending is bad, saving is good, or spending is some kind of like moral failing, like we are teaching how to view spending as a skill.
Yeah.
And then the rest of our book kind of like goes into what we talked about today, and then also how to make this lifestyle change sustainable, because there are things about like the people around you, the voices inside your head, like all these different things that can make lifestyle change really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And so, between the summit and this episode, you'll have a good idea. And then the book, we just like dive deeper into all of the practical practices.
That's awesome. I love your guys' approach. I love how balanced it is, and it just feels doable, right? So we will link to your podcast down below and definitely your book as well. And we will all look forward to seeing everyone at Get Organized HQ.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're looking for more support, be sure to check out The Minimal Mom on YouTube too. And we'll see you next time.